Remember? Not HOA property. You and your friends have been using it for free. That's over now. Her face was priceless, an ever-changing swirl of fury, disbelief, and the dawning realization that she had absolutely no power here. She spun on her heel, stomped back to her car, and, for the first time since moving in, she was forced to take the long way around. I expected resistance, but I underestimated just how far Karen was willing to go to get her way. First, she tried intimidation. Later that day, I caught her blocking my driveway with her car, arms crossed, eyes full of petty determination. She refused to move, standing there like some kind of guardian of righteousness, telling me that she was protesting the unjust taxation of the community. I calmly called a tow truck. She barely had time to sputter out an objection before her car was being hauled away, her expression shifting from righteous fury to outright panic. Next, she tried rallying the neighborhood against me. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail from the HOA, officially demanding that I remove the gate immediately. They cited community safety concerns and claimed I was violating neighborhood harmony. I almost laughed. The best part? At the bottom of the letter, Karen had personally added a note that read, "Failure to comply will result in serious action." I sent back a copy of my property deed with a note of my own. It read, "Nice try. Toll's still $10. The real fun began when I started noticing which neighbors actually didn't mind the toll. As it turned out, not everyone was a Karen. Plenty of people were happy to pay a few dollars if it meant avoiding the congested HOA road. Within a week, I had collected enough in toll fees to cover the cost of the gate installation. By the second week, I was turning a profit. Karen, of course, refused to pay. Instead, she continued taking the long way around, her anger growing with each passing day. Every time she drove past my property, I could feel the rage radiating from her car. It was almost entertaining. Almost. Then she escalated. One evening, I noticed something strange on my security cameras. Karen and a few of her HOA cronies had gathered near the entrance of my road, whispering among themselves. They were up to something. I stayed inside and watched, curious to see just how desperate she had become. A few minutes later, one of them pulled out a bolt cutter. I almost laughed out loud. She was really about to commit felony-level vandalism just to get past my gate. Before she could make the first cut, I turned on my porch lights and stepped outside. "Hey, Karen," I called out. "Need some help?" She froze. Everyone did. For a second, it was pure comedy. They were caught red-handed, bolt cutters in hand, guilt plastered all over their faces. Then, as if deciding that the best defense was a good offense, Karen puffed out her chest and glared at me. "You can't block public access," she barked, as if she wasn't about to destroy private property 5 seconds ago. I crossed my arms. "This isn't public access. And you just tried to vandalize my property. I've got it all on camera." The color drained from her face. The guy holding the bolt cutters slowly, very slowly, lowered them to his side. Karen opened her mouth, probably to spew more nonsense, but I held up my phone and wiggled it in the air. "Want me to call the cops, or do you want to leave?" For a moment, she hesitated, staring at me like she was weighing the consequences of her next move. Then, without a word, she turned around and marched back toward her car, her group following like a bunch of kids caught sneaking out past curfew. The next morning, another HOA letter arrived. This one was more desperate. Karen had apparently called an emergency board meeting and decided that my gate was a hazardous obstruction. They were threatening legal action now. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. I knew what was coming. Karen wasn't the type to take a loss gracefully. She had exhausted all her petty schemes, and now she was going to take the only route left, a lawsuit. I finished my coffee, pocketed the letter, and smiled. Let her try. I knew Karen wouldn't give up easily, but even I wasn't prepared for how far she was willing to go. The lawsuit arrived exactly 1 week after the bolt cutter incident. a thick, aggressively stapled stack of legal jargon, hand-delivered by a smug-looking HOA board member who strutted up to my porch like he had just served me a death sentence. I flipped through the first few pages, barely containing a smirk as I saw the allegations. According to Karen, my gate was an unlawful obstruction of a public access road and a deliberate act of aggression against the community. She was demanding that I remove it immediately or face severe legal consequences. I glanced up at the guy who delivered it, who was still standing there like he expected me to burst into tears. "Tell Karen I'll see her in court," I said, shutting the door in his face. If Karen thought a lawsuit was going to scare me, she was in for a rude awakening. I had done my homework. My road was private, my gate was legal, and I had every right to charge for its use. The problem was, Karen was an expert at making things unnecessarily complicated. Over the next few weeks, she went on a full-scale propaganda campaign. Flyers were taped to mailboxes claiming I was holding the neighborhood hostage. Emails circulated about how my gate was hurting property values. One particularly dramatic letter accused me of creating a financial burden on families by forcing them to choose between their wallets and their safety. It would have been hilarious if it weren't so exhausting. Every day, someone had something to say about my so-called greedy toll road. Some people sided with me, knowing exactly what kind of person Karen was. Others were just upset they had to drive the long way around because they refused to pay a measly $10. Then the HOA started getting desperate. Someone from their board, probably Karen herself, filed a complaint with the county, claiming that my gate violated local zoning laws. An inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, looking ready to find something, anything, that would make me remove it. I walked him through the paperwork, showed him the property deed, and let him see the security footage of Karen's little bolt cutter stunt. By the time he left, he was shaking his head, muttering about how ridiculous the whole situation was. Still, Karen wasn't done. The court date finally arrived, and I was fully prepared to watch her embarrass herself. Karen, dressed like she was about to deliver a TED Talk on neighborhood morality, had come armed with a folder of documents and a level of confidence that could only be described as delusional. The judge, a no-nonsense type who looked like he had dealt with one too many HOA disputes, barely let her finish her opening argument before cutting her off with a sigh. "Let me get this straight," he said, rubbing his temples. "You're claiming this man's private road is public property because you don't want to take the long way around?" Karen's eye twitched. "It's a vital access point for the community." "Vital?" The judge flipped through the document. "From what I see here, the road isn't registered as an HOA easement. It belongs to the defendant, who is legally allowed to regulate its use. So why exactly are we here today?" Karen launched into a speech about community well-being and shared responsibility, but the judge looked unimpressed. I was enjoying the show until she pulled out what she thought was her trump card, a so-called petition signed by dozens of neighbors, stating that my gate was unfair and should be removed. It would have been convincing, if not for one small problem. I had security footage of Karen going door to door, practically forcing people to sign it. Some of them had even reached out to me beforehand, apologizing and admitting they only signed it because they didn't want to deal with her wrath. When my lawyer presented the footage, the entire courtroom went silent. The judge sighed again, looking more annoyed than ever. "Miss Karen," he said, rubbing his forehead like he was getting a migraine, "you do realize that falsifying a petition can be considered fraudulent behavior?" Karen's face went through several shades of red before settling on a deep, furious purple. I was only trying to do what's best for the neighborhood," she stammered. The judge dismissed her case faster than I could blink. Not only did Karen lose, but she was ordered to pay for my legal fees as well. The look on her face when she realized she had to hand over thousands of dollars to the very person she was trying to take down? Worth every second of this entire ordeal. But the best part came afterward. As we were leaving the courthouse, the judge casually suggested something I hadn't even considered. If your road is so valuable to them, he mused, why not sell them access? It was like a light bulb went off in my head. The HOA wanted my road so badly? Fine. They could have it, but at a price. The negotiations were glorious. Karen, now significantly quieter after her public humiliation, had no choice but to sit there as I laid out the terms. If they wanted the HOA to have legal access to my road, they would have to buy an easement from me. And it wasn't going to be cheap. By the time the deal was finalized, the HOA was paying me a hefty annual fee for access, enough to more than cover my property taxes and then some. The toll gate remained, but now it was exclusively for non-residents, meaning anyone outside the HOA still had to pay if they wanted to use the shortcut. Karen, thoroughly defeated, resigned from the HOA board within a month. I heard she moved away shortly after, claiming the neighborhood had been ruined by greed. I celebrated the victory the only way I knew how, by throwing a party on my newly profitable road. Neighbors who had stuck by me showed up, laughing and clinking their drinks together as we watched cars roll through, each one adding a little more cash to my pocket. Someone even suggested renaming the road in Karen's honor. And so, with a freshly printed sign, the road was officially christened Karen Tollway. The whole thing started as a petty dispute over a shortcut. But in the end, I walked away with a steady income, a Karen-free neighborhood, and the satisfaction of knowing that for the rest of time, anyone who wanted to drive down my road would have to pay for the privilege. Sometimes, justice isn't just served. Sometimes, it collects a toll.